Hi, it's Samantha from Samantha by Design. Welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new here. Today I'll be showing you how to paint clouds in 5 different cloudscapes. I'll talk you through every step of the way and we'll also go over some do's and don'ts. Let's get started. Okay, so before we get started on painting our clouds, we're going to go over some of our materials for today. So I've gone ahead and prepped my canvas with 5 different backgrounds, as well as 2 that we are going to do our avoid techniques on. I've got a jar of water, a paper towel, my foam plate for my palette. I've also got my water mister to keep my paints wet while I work. I'm going to be using some brushes today. I will personally be using my 2 stiff bristle brushes for this painting, since they are small and they'll be able to fit in the little squares that I've created. So this one is a 1/4 inch bright, and this one also is a 1/4 inch, but it's an angle brush. And these are stiff bristles and they're pretty well used, so they're a little bit scruffy and they definitely don't hold their shapes anymore. You can also use Willow's blenders to make your cloud. So again, these are stiff bristle brushes. I'll be using a round brush for when we learn about our silver lining on some clouds. You can also use a dome blender. These are awesome. But I do recommend that you use a stiffer bristled brush that you don't mind scrubbing around with. You can use a brush with softer bristles, but you might ruin it because the canvas texture is a little bit rough and we will be doing some scrubbing. So let's get started. I'll zoom you guys in and we'll get started on our first big fluffy white cloud. Okay, so I have you zoomed in nice and close so you can see exactly what I'm doing. The first cloud we're working on is just a big white fluffy cloud on a nice blue sky day. So I'm going to be using titanium white, burnt umber, this color right here, burnt umber. Let's squeeze some out, as well as ultramarine blue for this cloud purposes. All right, so if you look at the reference photo that I've just provided, it will also be in the description below. You can see that the clouds have different colors. It's not just a big white fluffy cloud. So let's actually go to our avoid square first. I'm just gonna slide you guys down a little bit. Okay, so we're gonna go over what to avoid. So if you look at the reference, you see that the cloud has a lot of different layers. It's lighted in a way that you see the different layers. So there are shadows, there are highlights to the clouds. I'd say rule of thumb, when you're painting big fluffy white clouds on a bright blue sky afternoon, there will be at least 3 colors. So you'll have a low light, a mid-tone, and a highlight. So what you want to avoid doing is just going in with your pure white and creating these shapes like when you used to draw as a child. You don't want to do this. This does not look like a realistic cloud. If the look you're going for is this, then by all means use this technique. But if you're trying to paint in a more realistic manner, this is not going to work for you. And just going in with your pure white and just scrubbing it like that. So now let's go back to our do square. I'll slide you guys again. Sorry if you guys are motion sick. All right. So we're going to start by putting in our low lights and working our way up. So we'll use our darkest color first. So for that, I'm going to take my ultramarine blue and my burnt umber, and I'm going to mix them together. And I'm going to create a nice blue-gray color. If you don't have ultramarine and burnt umber, you can use blue, black, and white if you'd like. This is just a color mix that I really like. So I'm using more blue than brown here. And I'm getting this nice blue-gray color that I will be adding a little bit of white to, because it's not a storm cloud, but I do want some lowlights. Okay, that's a good starting point. So what I'm going to do is look at my reference. You guys look at yours, and we're going to just make a shape. We're not going to copy it exactly. I just want to show you guys how to do it. So we're going to create our basic outline of the cloud. Let's say we'll start here, and with our darkest color, we're just going to map out how we want our cloud to be. So keep this nice and irregular. We'll add a bit more white so you can see what I'm doing. So keep it nice and irregular. Now work your way down. And then the bottom is flat. So we're just going to flatten out the bottom. Grab more paint on your brush. I don't have a ton of paint on my brush. I'd like to note that. And I'm just going to scrub in circular motions. This is just our base layer. We need a layer to work on. So we're putting our darkest color down first. And we're just going to scrub in a circle, keeping it extremely, extremely random. And we're going to fuzz out the bottom edge here by scrubbing whatever we have left on our brush, like that. So we're going to start with this. And now it's important that you let it dry so that your paint doesn't lift off the canvas. So we'll give this a quick blow dry and then we'll continue with our cloud. Okay, so now our first layer is nice and dry. I've rinsed off my brush and I'm dabbing it on my paper towel to get most of the water out of it. I will be working with a dry brush technique for most of this, meaning that my brush, like, it can be damp, but I want it more on the dry side. So if you can see on my hand here, no water's coming off at all. Now we're going to be working on our midtones. So if you look at your reference, you can see that there is a lot of white on the cloud, but there's also some darker colors and a little bit of a lighter color before we get to our pure white. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab some white on our brush. We're going to put it off to the side here, and we're going to grab a little bit of this dark color that we mixed up. And we're going to create an off-white color. Like this. So you can see it's not pure white, but it's not the darkest color either. And I'm going to make sure I don't have a lot of paint on my brush. And now what we're going to do is we'll start working on some midtones. So since clouds have different layers, I don't want to just go around in the same shape. So I'm going to pick a spot and create kind of different cloud layers within the cloud. So I'll show you what I mean. All right, so we'll start off at the top here. And I'm going to leave some of the darkness. We'll kind of go like this. We'll add some here. Okay. We're going to leave some of that dark color showing through. Just grabbing some more paint on my brush. Making some random shapes. Using a circular motion, sometimes back and forth if I want to fuzz out the edge, which I do here, because if you look at your reference, the bottom of this cloud is fairly dark. So I'm not going to work too much on highlighting and using midtones on the bottom part here. I want to keep it fairly dark. Okay. Create a shape going this way. You can add extra shapes if you'd like. You can always change the shape of your cloud. That's the beauty of acrylic. They dry fast and you can just alter the shape. Okay, so that's our second layer. While that's drying, I also want to show you that you can just add some little wispy clouds beside it, because not all clouds are big and fluffy like this. Sometimes your clouds are just nice little light airy bits of clouds. So you can just add some using side to side, very light pressure. There's barely any paint on my brush. You can just add some little wispy clouds. You can add some smaller clouds underneath. Okay. There we go. You can add clouds coming in from the corners. All right, to finish off your sky. So now we're going to dry this again and we'll be adding a highlight. But first, let's take you over to the avoid side again, because what we don't want to do when highlighting and low lighting our cloud is to create like a border. So I don't want to be doing this. Okay, you can see the huge difference here. This cloud looks far more realistic than this one does. If this is the look again that you're going for, you want a fantasy world with perfect little fluffy childlike drawing clouds, that's totally fine. It's your painting. I'm just showing you how I like to paint my clouds. There's a million different ways to paint clouds, but you don't want to create perfect borders of where you're highlighting and low lighting. Okay, you don't want to make like your low light highlight and shrink it down like that. We're going to keep it fair, like airy and full of movement. So we're going to give this a quick blow dry and then we'll add our highlights. Okay, so our next layer is dry, it's cool to the touch, and we are ready to put the highlights on our cloud. So I'm going in this time with just my pure titanium white. Again, there's not a lot of paint on my brush. I'm not grabbing a big blob, and even this is a little too much for my liking, so I'll wipe off some extra on the paper towel, and then this is what my brush looks like. Okay, so now we're gonna highlight. So pick a light source if you didn't already do that. If your sun is coming directly from this way, highlight these sides of the clouds. I'll show you what I mean. So let's say the sun is shining down and we want to highlight this cloud like this and this one like this. Okay, and if you get too much of a hard line, you could blot it off with your fingers. All right, and then I'm going to make another cloud here on top of that one, another layer. I'm going to highlight this side of it. Okay, I'm keeping this very random. And I'm gonna use barely any pressure here or any paint left on my brush to scrub out the bottom here, because again, the bottom is darker. All right, so you can see already that made a huge difference. You pick your highlight spot, so it's like the sun is shining down like this on my clouds, so it's hitting, the lightest part is where the sun would be hitting it. All right, and I'll also show you how to do clouds if your sun is directly behind them, when they're backlit. All right, so let's say you decided you wanted your cloud a little bit darker. Maybe you took out too many of your low lights. We can just put them back in. So just rinse out your brush. We're gonna grab our darkest color that we had mixed up with our ultramarine blue, our burnt umber, and a little bit of white. And you can always go back in and just add some of that dark color back in if you'd like. Okay, create different shapes. All right, there you go. And you could add some more white. You can just keep playing around with this until you're happy with your cloud. And also for the little wispies, you can add little highlights on those as well. Okay, just little wispy clouds. You can smudge them out with your fingers if you'd like. All right, now if we go over to the avoid side, I'll show you that sometimes wispy clouds, if they're done incorrectly, they could look a little bit odd if you're going for a realistic sky. So I'm not just creating little horizontal lines like this. Like even if you smudge them, it looks a little bit odd. And I'm also not making my little wispy clouds like perfect little circular motions, because then it just makes a smaller cloud in the distance. So for wispy clouds, you really want to go quick and kind of avoid thinking about the shape too much and just smudge the paint around. Okay, and again, we don't want to highlight our big cloud inside of our low lights like this. We want to avoid doing something like this. All right, so now you can see the difference between our avoid side and our do side. We have a nice big fluffy cloud. It's a nice blue sunny day. And now you know how to paint that kind of cloud, and you can just do it over the whole sky. And if you want to practice big fluffy clouds, I have tutorials on beachscapes, sunsets. You can just check out the other videos on my channel and you could practice your clouds. So now we're going to go over to our next square and we're going to be talking about sunset clouds. So let me grab my paint colors. So for our next square here, if you look at your reference image, I've provided it in the description. I'll be using some quinacridone magenta, some dioxazine purple. I'll also keep using our mixture of burnt umber and ultramarine blue as well. And I'll also keep using the titanium white for this. So for our first cloud I'd like to cover for this sunset in particular is the dark purple cloud right on the top of the image. So for that, I'm going to use my dioxazine purple, and it's a little too purple. So instead of darkening it with black or dulling it out with black, I'm going to go into the ultramarine blue and add a little bit of burnt umber, because ultramarine blue and burnt umber create kind of their own version of a black color. It's monochromatic black, or a chromatic black, sorry, not monochromatic, chromatic. And we're going to create this nice dark purple color. Okay, and again, not too much paint on my brush. And we're gonna go over to our little corner here. And again, the same technique we were doing here, random shape. We're gonna just create a dark purple cloud. You can follow the reference exactly, but I'm just showing you quickly different ways to paint your clouds. Okay. So we'll go like this. Add a little bit more pigment. Okay, and we can add a little bit of a wispy cloud with this same color. That was too much paint on my brush. A little smaller cloud up here. We can add little bips and bops of clouds around it, kind of like they broke off and they're floating away to go join another cloud. We can refine the shapes. Okay, we can add some coming this way, but we're using this dark purple color. And I find it's important to use a reference image when you're painting, because you wouldn't be adding a white cloud like this to a sunset. But you wouldn't also know exactly what color clouds to make, because on an orange sunset, they're not purple clouds, not always. Okay, so that's all we'll do with our dark purple for now. Now I'm going to rinse out my brush and wipe the excess water off. There's still some purple pigment on there, so what I'm going to do is grab some of my titanium white and this purple here. And you see it made a gray purple without us needing to use black to gray it out. Because at the bottom there are some little purple gray clouds at the very, very, very bottom of our sunset here. So we're going to create a very small, irregular shape at the bottom. You can add a little bit more purple if it's looking too gray. But we're just going to create this small cloud line at the bottom here. Also, it's important to note that the clouds on top of your reference image are the ones that are closest to you. So those are going to be bigger, relatively, rule of thumb. And the clouds that are at the bottom of your reference picture, those are the clouds at the horizon, the further away clouds. So they're going to look smaller. Okay, so we've done that. We can add some more purple now and take some of the gray out. Grab some pure purple and some white. And we can add little wispies. Okay. And now if you look at the reference, you see that it's not just purple for our clouds. There are also some pink clouds and some light white yellow clouds. So I'll also be using cadmium yellow medium. I'm going to put that out on my palette right now. But basically I use the same technique that we just used for our big fluffy white cloud to put in some random purple clouds for our sunset. My shapes are random. They're not perfect little circles. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my quinacridone magenta, which is this nice pink color. And I'll add a tiny little bit of white to it just to make it a little bit more opaque, because this color is fairly transparent. And I'm going to add some pink clouds around it as well. I'm kind of looking at my reference, but I'm mostly just showing you guys how I would do this real quick. You can cross over some clouds to show that this one is maybe behind this cloud. Okay, you can add some little wispy lines. Okay, like that. And then if we want to add some lighter pink clouds, we're just going to grab a little bit more titanium white. And then at the bottom here, we can scribble in some wispy little light pink clouds. All right, I'm going to add a tiny, tiny, tiny little bit of cadmium yellow medium to my pink. The quinacridone magenta and the cadmium yellow make a really, really nice light orange color. But I'm going to keep this fairly light yellow, almost white. I'm just tinting the white with some yellow. And I'm going to go over some of these little clouds here and just maybe add a little touch of if the sun was kissing these and they're turning a little bit yellow. But I'm not going to take this all the way up to the blue because the sun wouldn't be reflecting all the way up here. Otherwise, the purple clouds would have highlights. So we're just going to scrub this in a little bit. All right, and that's pretty much it. You painted a sunset. We can add a little bit more darker pink clouds around them. Again, you can go into your dark purple and maybe add a few more. And there we go. You have a little sunset. Now this is super basic. I'm just showing you extremely easy techniques of how to put this in. This is for beginners. And now we're gonna go over to our avoid side and I'll tell you what I was talking about by you wouldn't just be putting a white cloud like this. Or it might look a little bit wonky. So we're just gonna slide you down. And now we're on a different type of sunset sky because sometimes they do go from blue to orange instead of from blue to pink. So what we wouldn't do here is make a white fluffy cloud. So even if I'm using the right technique and I'm just trying to put my cloud in, using a nice white cloud might look odd on a sunset. Like it's a nice cloud shape, but it looks a little off or out of place. Instead, I'd be matching my colors, so I might grab some yellow, maybe make an orange, and I'd be playing around with that instead. It's much more natural for a sunset, instead of using a whitish blue-gray color. Okay, do you understand what I mean? I hope so. I hope this is making sense so far. So we've already talked about a nice bright sunny day. We've done a sunset. We did some do's and don'ts. And now we're going to start talking about clouds that are lit from the back. So clouds with the sun right behind them. I'll take out my colors and then we'll go over that. All right, so if you look at your reference, this cloud is lit from the back. So the sun is behind it and it's making it look like there's this outline, which we're going to call the silver lining of the cloud, where the sun is the brightest, and then the front of the cloud, the last layer that there's no sun hitting it, is quite dark. So we're going to start with the darkest color again. I'm going to rinse out my brush, dry it off on my paper towel, and I'm going to mix, again, my ultramarine blue and my burnt umber together to create a black. If you don't have these two colors, feel free to use black paint. That is completely fine. I'll show you that it's okay. I'll put some out and we'll use that as well. Okay, so I put out a little black. I'll just go ahead and mix it right in. Okay, and the first layer is fairly dark. So again, we're going to make up a shape or use the shape on the reference. We're going to keep it irregular. And we're going to move our brush around. We're going to create our darkest layer. scrub in a circular motion. Okay, and you can see that mine's going on fairly transparent because I have more of the ultramarine blue and burnt umber than black. So if I was doing this for a commissioned painting or painting I was selling, I would be doing another layer just to cover up more of that background. It kind of looks cool like that as well. Okay, so now we have our basic shape. Maybe we'll round this up a little bit. Okay, so we have our basic shape with our darkest layer here. Maybe I'll add a little bit more right here. Okay, and again, just like before, we are going to give this a blow dry or let it dry naturally before we try to do anything else. So let's give this a dry and then we'll meet back up. Okay, so now this is nice and dry to the touch. It's cool. All right, so we can do another layer. So now I'm going to make a slightly lighter version of the color I just had. So I'll add a little bit of white to this. And I'm looking for a color that's a little bit lighter, but not too light. And if you look at your reference, you see that there are some lighter parts of the sun is poking through some of the thinner parts of the cloud. So we are going to add this lighter color to certain spots. Not all of the spots. We don't want to cover all of the work we just did. We're just going to add a lighter layer to some parts of the cloud. Okay. There's barely any paint on my brush. And now we're going to add a little bit more white to create a lighter version of what we just did. And we're just going to add a even lighter gray to some of the gray spots that we just added. Okay, even off to the side of the cloud here, we can add lighter gray here, up here. Okay, we can add a little bit down here. Okay, and see, I accidentally created a shape here. I made like an X, so I'm just going to rinse my brush and just add our darkest color again. So I'm going to use the burnt umber, the ultramarine, and some black. And I'm just going to take this out by adding another layer. Okay. This is a great part of acrylic. It covers well. So you can always add more layers. There we go. Now at the bottom of our cloud, there is some lighter gray. So I'm going to add some of that too. I'm going to dry off my brush. Add a nice light gray here. Okay, don't be afraid to go over some colors. I'm going to add some darker gray on top of that again, just to make it look like the sun is peeking out from behind. Okay, there we go. So now we're going to dry that again, and then we're going to do the silver lining, and then it'll really show that the sun is peeking out from behind, because right now it's looking a little crazy, but have some faith. Acrylic is all about layers. So let's give that a dry, and then we will do the last step. All right, so now this is all nice and dry, and I'll be switching brushes to go over the edges to create the sunlit effect. So I'm going to be using a very small detail round brush. I'm going to wet it in my jar. I don't want this brush to be dry. It works better when it's wet. And I'm just going to, again, just grab some pure white. Okay. And we are basically just going to outline the cloud, which is, I said not to do at the beginning because we weren't doing a backlit cloud, but now we do want to outline it and create a silver lining effect. So I'm going to pick a spot, and I'm not going to outline perfectly. Okay, so I'll take you to the don't side real quick. So what I'm not going to do is go around my cloud like this. Okay, I'm not going to create this perfect straight line like that. What I want to do instead is create super random shapes around it. Some spots are thicker, some are lighter, okay? So we're going to be wiggling our brush around. We don't want to create these perfect like outlines. It'll look unrealistic. So I'm just going to wet my brush a little bit, grab some more white on there, move you back over to the yes side. And we are going to create an effect that looks like the sun is shining from behind our cloud. So I'm just going to pick a spot, start wiggling my brush. Okay. Just start wiggling it in. There we go. It's starting to look like the sun is shining directly behind our cloud. So I am following the outline, but I'm keeping my shapes extremely irregular. Even some spots I might light on the inside. Okay. When I get to the bottom here, it's less outlined and there's more highlights. So I'm just going to scrub in a few little highlights. Okay, and there's not a whole lot of paint on my brush. We're just going to outline some spots. Alright, so we're just going to keep going around. The bottom is less outlined and a little bit more smeared in. Okay. Again, I'm using irregular shapes. I'm wiggling my brush, different thicknesses. You can see now that it's really starting to look as if the sun was peeking out from behind the cloud. Okay. We could add a couple more highlights to certain spots. Okay, and now we can go back over with our dark color or our mid-tone color, whichever one you'd like. I'll do a little bit of both. I'll meet in the middle. And then we can go back over some of these spots to make them look like they're blended in. I'm still using my small detail brush for this. Got a little bit more brown in there than I wanted. Okay. Or if you want. All right. And there you go. That's how you would paint a backlit cloud with this silver lining for this specific reference picture. Some might look a little bit different. And now next we're going to do the same backlit idea with a silver lining, but for a sunset cloud. So let's zoom you into that part of our square. Okay, so we're going to basically be applying the same techniques, but with different colors to show that we're doing this over top of sunset. Ignore this spot here, I got some blue in my orange while I was making the background. But basically we're going to be doing the same thing. So first we're going to have to mix up a color. If you look at the reference, it's kind of like a brownish orange color. So what I'm going to do is take some cadmium orange with a little bit of cadmium yellow, medium, and to gray it out, I will be adding some ultramarine blue. And some yellow until I get a color that is kind of muddy. More orange. All right, so now we have this kind of brownish orange color, which is perfect. That's what our cloud looks like. And it's kind of got a red cast to it. So I'm also going to be taking out some cadmium red medium as well. To add some glow to that too. So this will be my darkest color here. We can even add a smidge of black off to the side here if we needed to. Okay. And we are going to create a cloud. So I'll just go over this spot that I already darkened here by accident. And again, I'm just going to create an irregular shape. Okay. We can do a smaller one so that you can see that it's pretty much the same thing. So we'll add a small one here. Okay. We'll add another irregular shaped one here. Okay, and now we are going to give that a quick blow dry because we want this next layer to be completely dry for our next step. Okay, our cloud is nice and dry, and now if you look at the reference, our medium tone is kind of like this reddish orange outline before our silver lining. So we're going to take our cadmium red medium and we're going to add a little bit of cadmium orange to it and maybe a little bit of cad yellow. We're mixing all these colors together. We're going to get this nice vibrant orange. And we're just going to go over some of these spots around the edges of this. Not everywhere again, but we'll be adding some of this orangey red color. Okay, so we're basically using the same technique of mid-tone lowlights and highlights, but we're applying it to a different type of cloud on a different sky. But the techniques are the same. Okay, can add some in. Okay, we'll add a little bit to our smaller clouds. I'll go right over the wispy cloud to make it look like it's got more layers. I can go back into my darker color and just do another layer of that. Whoops, I added a little too much black to my brush. Just blend that in a little bit more. Create some more depth. Okay, and you guessed it, we're going to dry that one more time before we add in our yellow, and I'll also show you a little troubleshooting thing because sometimes your yellow will go on transparent, and I'll show you how to fix that. So this is all nice and dry, but before we start adding our yellow silver lining, I just want to troubleshoot something with you here. So I will grab my detail brush again. We're switching brushes back to the small detail brush. And since I am working on a sunset, my silver lining is not going to be white. So what I'm not going to do is add white around this. The sun is reflecting and it's reflecting yellow. But sometimes what happens, let me rinse my brush, is that your yellow kind of doesn't cover. So if I was trying to outline this one, if you're using a lower quality paint or a student paint, it might go on a little transparent and might look on a little bit green. So a way to fix that is by adding a layer of white first. So if I add some white to this, okay, and I let it dry, so we'll use this as an example here, and I add yellow on top, you can see the huge difference between the two yellows. This one is way more vibrant, whereas this one, it looks kind of dull and it took kind of a green cast because it's going over top of blue. So we're going to avoid that. So what we're going to do is outline it in white first, and then we'll do another layer of yellow on top. So I'm just going to rinse out my brush. I'm working with a damp brush this time since this is a detail brush. It works better that way. There's barely any paint on my brush, and I'll do the same technique again, a random wiggle. Okay, so we'll start at the top. And we're going to go around. And it will be yellow, don't worry. We're just adding the white first so that our yellow shows up. Yellow shows up best on top of white paint. Okay, so we'll go around like this. And then when we get to the bottom of our reference, on this side of the cloud, the line's a little bit thicker. And some spots go inside the cloud because it's more transparent there, so the sun is passing through. But the bottom has a thicker line of that silver lining. So we're just going to do that around the entire cloud. Okay, we'll connect this here. We'll add a few spots down here that went through. Okay, we can even add a little dot here so that we can add some of the orange background back in, because some parts of the clouds are fairly transparent. So we'll do that. While that's drying, we'll do the other clouds. So the little cloud, we're going to add a thicker line at the bottom again. It helps if you pick up your brush as well and not just do one continuous motion. If you pick up your brush randomly, it'll give you good results. Well, it'll be more random that way. You can add little dots because we can add some yellow on those as well. We'll add some to this one. All right. So now we're gonna let that dry again, and then we will glaze the yellow over top. So now that that is nice and dry, we can go back over with our pure yellow. I'm using cadmium yellow medium. I'm still using my detail brush. I don't have a ton of paint on my brush. I'm gonna use a little bit less water this time so that my paint stays a little bit thicker, but this is what the load looks like on the brush. And I'm just gonna go right back over those white lines and cover them with yellow. And we can go back over these little dots that we put on the inside as well. Wiggling my brush, making sure I'm covering all the white. And we are getting there. Okay, so again, if you'd like to have a say in future tutorials, or you'd like to see what kind of art I create, or you want to participate in the charity auctions, you can join my Facebook group. It's in the link down below in the description. I absolutely love the Facebook group. We have quite a few members now. It's a lot of fun. Everyone is super supportive. You can show me your work there. You can ask me questions. I have the links to all my other socials down there as well. Okay, so now that's backlit, we'll add the little clouds. Okay, and then once you're done practicing these little techniques here, you can go over to my other tutorials and you can apply these techniques to paint the other tutorials, like the beach, the sunset. Maybe you want to paint a galaxy. They're basically all the same techniques, just with different colors, different backgrounds. So if you'd like to give that a try, you can go check out the other videos as well. Okay, so now that's outlined, I'm gonna rinse out my brush, and I'm just gonna put some dark back in to smooth out some of those lines a little bit. So I'm gonna take the darkest color again, and I might just go over some to change the shape a little bit. You have the freedom to do that with acrylic paint. Again, it is super forgiving. If you make a mistake, just wait for it to dry and then just paint right over it. No stress. See, like, I don't like the shape of this cloud, so I'm just gonna change it. Okay. And now you have a backlit sunset cloud. Okay, so we have one more type of cloud to go over. I'm gonna switch you guys over to the last square, and we're gonna be talking about stormier clouds. So let me give that a dry so I don't put my hand in it, since I am left-handed, and then we'll talk about this cloud. Okay, last cloud. So if you look at the reference image, looks like it might rain in this picture. It's a little bit of a stormier cloud, and we could see that it's not technically backlit, kind of, but it doesn't have a silver lining like the ones we've done, but our darkest color is on the top. So we'll be working backwards from the first cloud we did up here. So instead of going from our darkest color to our lightest color, we'll go from the lightest color and layer the dark on top. So let's get started on that. Again, I will be using ultramarine blue and burnt umber. I'm just gonna rinse out my brush and make sure there's no orange or yellow left from the sunset. I'm gonna give it a nice dry so that it's not soaking wet. And again, I'm gonna go right into the ultramarine blue and the burnt umber, and I'm gonna create a dark color. And we're gonna leave that to the side because we will be starting with our lighter color. So I'm just gonna grab some white, find a clean spot on my palette. Now I'm not using pure white because my brush was a little dirty, and that's okay. And we are going to create a cloud shape. So again, I'm not following the reference exactly. I'm just showing you how you would paint this type of cloud. But if you want to practice with the reference photo, go ahead. So we're going to start by maybe adding some light colors here. There's light colors on the bottom. Okay, again, I'm being super random. That's my biggest tip for when I'm painting clouds, is I'm not thinking about what I'm doing really. I'm looking at the reference and then I'm moving my brush kind of in a hectic manner. But that's what gives me my best results. So I'm just gonna make sure that we have enough of an outline to work with. Random shapes, random motions. Some clouds are fluffier, some are flatter. Okay. Take this right up to the top. I'm not worried about covering all of the blue that I put down because we will be adding the darker layers, but it's nice to get some color on there because again, clouds have different layers and it'll just look better the more layers you put on. Okay, we can add some smaller clouds again, just down here, little dots. Okay, maybe we can scrub in some other clouds here. All right, so we'll start with that. And you guessed it, we're gonna give it a blow dry once again because we want this next layer to be dry before we add a darker color. Now that our cloud is nice and dry, we can go back in and grab a darker color. So I'm going to grab some of this ultramarine blue and burnt umber mixture. I'm using more ultramarine blue than burnt umber. I'm gonna wipe off my brush and then we're gonna go back into our white, but we're gonna create a darker version of what we just put on. Okay. And now we're gonna start layering some storm clouds. So we wanna leave some of the white showing. We're gonna again move in random shapes, skip some spots. There's barely any paint on my brush. This is how I'm able to do this. I'm scrubbing. All right. And grab more paint. We can skip to down here. Just keep moving around your canvas. Don't stay stuck on one spot for too long because you might lift off the paint. We'll add a little bit to the one down here. Okay, we can connect some clouds. Go right over, and since the burnt umber and the ultramarine blue are transparent, we're getting these nice layers here. Okay. And we're going to dry that one more time. Now we are going to do the absolutely darkest colors. So we're going to go into our ultramarine blue and burnt umber and get the purest form of that color. So no white, just the blue and the brown. And if you don't have blue and brown, again, you can just use black and white. That's completely fine. Okay, and now we are going to go over our clouds and create our darkest shadows. So again, they don't have to be perfect. Wipe off some of the paint off my brush. Okay, maybe this one swoops down. Grab some more paint. Okay, maybe this one connects with that one. Okay, but now it looks like it's kind of gonna rain in this picture, which is perfect. There we go. And let's say you took out too much of your lightest color, we can just put it right back in. So rinse out your brush, dry it off, grab some of your white paint, and we can just put some highlights back in. Or more layers. Maybe there's another cloud on top of this one. Okay, don't be afraid to play around with it. If you're not happy with your results right away, you can always change it. Okay, there we are. And that's how I would paint a stormy cloud. Now we're going to go back over to the sunset because I want to show you, yes, these are backlit, but I want to show you that if you wanted to add more clouds to this, you absolutely could. So I wouldn't add purple clouds or super bright pink clouds for this, but you can absolutely go into your cadmium red, just your pure cadmium red, and just scribble in some other clouds. They don't all have to be backlit, because maybe these ones are directly in front of the sun, but these ones, perspective wise, they're not in front of the sun. They're a little bit behind it. They're just further away in the distance. So you can add some little red clouds. You can absolutely add some more brown clouds as well, kind of like these ones, but smaller. Okay, you can have some tiny little backlit clouds. You can have some random clouds like this. You can have some yellowy orange clouds as well. Okay, you're not limited. Just play around with it. Look at some reference images. I would definitely suggest reference images. It's much easier than trying to make up clouds in your head. And again, if you don't like a cloud, just paint right over it. You're not stuck with a certain painting. So I hope that was helpful. We'll zoom you out and we'll go back over what we learned. Okay, so we learned how to paint a nice fluffy white cloud on a nice sunny day. We learned some sunset clouds, a backlit cloud on a blue sky. We learned some stormy clouds. We did some definitely avoids here. This was our mistake area. And we did some backlit clouds, but on a sunset. So just play around with this, practice, grab a blank sheet of paper. You don't have to use a canvas. You can use different colors. Find a reference image that you like and just try to replicate the clouds, or try one of my tutorials like I've mentioned. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you learned a lot about painting clouds, and I hope this video was helpful for you. If you enjoyed this tutorial, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and click the bell to be notified when I upload. I put up a video every Tuesday and Friday. Have a wonderful day and take care of yourselves. Bye!